Hello everyone, this is Ruma Devi and my presentation is on the effects of burnout on public and private sector employee. Burnout applied to a state where a person feels extremely tired, loses interest, and gets frustrated at the workplace. Burnout is often the outcome of continued stress. The following presentation will inform about my research proposal that will measure the effects of workplace burnout and the differences found when comparing the influence of burnout on employee in both the private and public sectors. The first concept of burnout was proposed by Freudenberger in 1974. His concept of burnout was conceptualized as a composition of long-term emotional burnout, physical fatigue, not participating in business, removing those receiving service from humanity, and low business success. Freudenberg defined burnout syndrome as a result of the information he gained from his clinical experience studies. We see oftentimes when employees are stressed or burnout, their commitment at the job may begin to weaken and they may lose satisfaction. Workplace burnouts often result from prolonged stress, which in turn influence physical alignment such as exhaustion and workplace insecurity. Theories of workload burnout. Marshall defined burnout as the experience of exertion where the individual who suffers from it becomes cynical toward the value of their occupation and doubt their ability to perform. His composition of burnout has three dimensions, which are exhaustion, cynicism, and lack of professional efficiency. First one, exhaustion refers to feeling of stress, especially chronic fatigue resulting from excessive workload. The second dimension is cynicism, refers to a detached attitude toward work in general and the people with whom one works. It's leading to the loss of interest in work and feeling that work has lost its meaning. And finally, lack of professional efficiency, which refers to reduced feelings of efficiency, successful attainment, and accomplishment both in one job and the organization. Let's look at the literature. This slide references previous research studies that have been done on public sector and private sector employees. Different findings have generated different results because of their perspective. Some studies argue that public sector employees are subject to greater stress while others argue the opposite. The literature review demonstrated that work-related stress is almost equal in both the public and private sector and that research on the topic continues, a popular field of inquiry. Based on the first research, hypothesis supported for this study will be that private sector employees will have a higher burnout ratio than public sector employees. The purpose of this study to measure burnout by using the Copenhagen Burnout Inventory to compare the influences of burnout between public and private sector employees and determine which group has a higher or lower burnout ratio. This study approaches the individual level instead of an organization level. Another aspect of this capstone research project could integrate the influence of how an organization influences an employee's performance as related to burnout. The subject variable in this study will be the type of workplace, public and private sector, which will be manipulated among the subject participants during the process of data collection. The dependent variable will be the CBI that will be collected and analyzed based on the response provided by the participant. Finally, the research question asked is, does the level of job burnout among employees in public sector differ from the level of job burnout among employees in private sector? Let's look at the limitation of this study. In terms of the sampling, a sample will be taken from only 2 organizations, which leads to the external validity. External validity refers to the degree to which the result can be generalized to a more universal population if the sample was taken from more than 2 organizations. Data collection. Data will be collected from operational or lower level employee only while excluding the other level of staff within the organization. For example, excluding the management level of employee in order to ensure that the data collected does not mislead the result. This research will be confined to measure only few elements of burnout, such as personal burnout, work-related burnout, and co-worker-related burnout. For future research, additional elements of burnout and dimension regarding workplace burnout that impact employee performance could be studied, such as supervisor-related burnout. Let's look at our method section. As we know, the main aim of this study is to assess the influence and effects of burnout on the performance of employee in public compared to private workplace. The target population that will be surveyed and measured for this project are employees working in a New York City government agency and a private sector organization. Research data will be gathered from staff working within the city agency and private sector organization. There will be a total of 60 survey participants that will include 30 New York City government agency employee and 30 private sector employee. A consent form will be used to ensure confidentiality. Demographic question will be used to measure employee demographics. The Copenhagen Burnout Inventory is a questionnaire instrument with 3 sub-dimensions. They are personal burnout, work-related burnout, and client-related burnout. The 3 separate parts of the questionnaire were designed to be applied in different areas. The CBI questionnaire contains a total of 18 questions across 3 subsections. There are 6 questions for each subsection. Each question is measured on a 5-point Likert type scale on an anchor of 1 equal never and 5 equal always. The question on personal burnout were prepared in a way so that all people can answer them in a truly generic scale. The work-related burnout question assumes that the respondent has paid some sort of kind. Finally, the client-related burnout, which has been modified by me for my research need to co-worker-related burnout so that the question can include the term co-worker. The length of survey will be about 10 minutes, and the instruction of how to take the survey will be provided in top of the survey. Let's move on to plan analysis. Participant recruitment will depend on a strategy of snowball sampling. The researcher will approach the employee individually and describe the study to them. Informed consent forms will be provided by the researcher to employees who agree to participate in the study. The study will evaluate burnout on the performance of public and private sector employees in the workplace. Samples from 2 separate populations will be measured and surveyed for this project. Employee working in a New York City government agency and employee working in the private sector. Outcome data will be analyzed through the Copenhagen Burnout Inventory, a survey which will represent public and private sector employees and will be used to determine how burnout influences performance. Descriptive statistics, especially the mean and standard deviation, will be used to summarize and graph the data for both groups. An independent sample t-test will be conducted to determine if there is a statistical difference between public and the private sector employees' workload burnout. In this study, researchers will compare the workload burnout between public sector and private sector employees. The use of an independent sample t-test can help to decide whether the difference between these 2 conditions is real or whether it is due merely to chance from one time of testing to another or to measurement error. Means, variance, and sample size from each group will be used to determine the significant difference between the 2 different workplaces. This will also find what is the t-score, and the t-value is to determine if the null hypothesis should be accepted or rejected. If p is greater than 0.05, then null hypothesis will be rejected. If it is rejected, then I will be able to conclude there is a significant difference between public and the private sector employee workload burnout. Thank you all of you for looking at my presentation. I hope you guys enjoy it. Please feel free to leave any feedback or suggestion you have for my final proposal. Thank you so much. Good luck, everyone.